Everybody. Thank you so very much for tuning into this important conversation. My name is DeShara Doub. I'm the founder and chief executive officer of Promise LLC. And again, thank you for validating that this conversation on racial trauma is important, it's necessary, it's it's devastating, but needed. And so I thank you all for tuning in, whether you're watching live or watching the replay. I want to dive directly into this topic because, as of many lives that Vision of Promise LLC has done, this one is a very personal one. I am a racial minority. I am a member of a group who has experienced trauma that goes back hundreds and hundreds of years. And with the recent social media and news outlets broadcasting many continued unfortunate events with individuals that look like me and that are a part of particularly the African American community, experiencing unfortunate violence by the hands of authority, by the hands of individuals who um, took a vow and took an oath to protect and serve. And as many of you that are watching this, I watched it. I was devastated. I was bewildered and unsure how to process the information, how to begin trying to navigate, trying to determine and reflect on what I could do as a member of this community to give back, to raise awareness, and to most importantly, take care of myself in the process. And so I thought it was important to come onto this platform, a platform that was the brainchild of someone who has directly experienced racial trauma, to provide a needed space for all those who have unfortunately had to deal with the direct and indirect experiences of racial trauma. So again, this is not an easy Facebook Live. This is not an easy conversation to be had, but it's definitely a necessary one. And again, I appreciate each of you all for your viewing. Um, really quickly, Vision of Promise LLC is on Instagram as well as on this platform on Facebook. We do have a website, www.thevisionofpromise.com. If you feel that in the midst of this broadcast or in this viewing that you are in need of additional resources, you can definitely find us on not only our website but other social media platforms such as this one on Facebook as well as Instagram. So let's dive into this conversation. Racial trauma. Why is it a necessary conversation to have? Well, first off, it's unfortunate that in the age of social media, we are constantly exposed to the unfortunate events that are surrounding not only what's in our own neighborhoods and in our own backyards, within our own personal experiences, but the experiences of others throughout the United States, throughout the country at large, throughout the world, where individuals that are in marginalized populations, I can speak from experience as being an African American, being Black in the United States, where we are exposed to, through social media and through news, the constant trauma, the constant violence of individuals that look like us in the hands of individuals who have made an oath to protect and serve, who have made an oath to be authority and to be the phone call away, to be the leading force in handling disputes and ensuring the safety and the protection of everyone. And in the recent years, unfortunately, we have really been able to see firsthand the impacts of racial trauma, of violence, of discrimination, of racism. And this conversation isn't delved into a lot because it's heavy, because it stirs up a lot of emotions, because honestly, there's a lot of uncertainty of how to manage these conversations. And as I was preparing for this live this evening, I looked at a couple of research articles around racial trauma, around post traumatic stress disorder, around really the expansion of how to not only diagnose, but how to treat the trauma of individuals in marginalized populations. The research is fairly new and a lot of times very difficult to engage in how to really identify what this looks like and how to treat it. And as a mental health professional and as a person that is in the marginalized population that has had direct and also experienced indirect racial tensions, violences, it is very hard to separate the needing to cope with and handle the situations as a professional, but also dealing with the harsh realities of being in a role, being in a grouping that is experiencing this head on. So, my intention in this live is to one, provide necessary space to share what I have found as a professional and how to one, identify what this trauma is. When we see it, when we experience it, what happens to us, what happens at the moment, and also what happens in the aftermath. And how do we do our best to treat, to care for ourselves, and the recognition that this has been an unfortunate ongoing situation for quite some time. So, what exactly is racial trauma? It is not only the direct experience, what you see, what you feel in that moment, but it can also be the indirect ramifications of being discriminated against, of being feeling like you are unprotected, unheard, unseen, that your life might not matter, that you have to consistently and constantly prove yourselves to the masses, prove your intellect, prove your ability to withhold a job, your ability to maintain the constant day to day. It is the experience that can go from a spectrum of extreme violence to the microaggressions of the everyday navigation through the world. And I must say that this is a sad reality that even myself has had to experience in spaces that you would not think that you can experience discrimination, trauma, segregation, separation, despair. And it's a tough one. And I think that as a member of a marginalized community, many of us can sit in that space of understanding how that feels. And there are some that identify it in terms of the physical, being able to say, this person looks like me, this group looks like me, I can identify this. This looks like someone that I love and care for, but maybe not have directly experienced it. But I think also to shed light on the individuals that can be allies, those who might not directly be in the marginalized population, but have loved ones that are experiencing the traumas of navigating a world that is unfair, navigating a world that at times lacks empathy and compassion for all those that do not look like them, that maybe don't share the same privileges as them. It could be a very tough space to sit in. I think that having the feelings of sadness, of despair, of hopelessness is one that many marginalized communities are constantly in. And it's a constant need to just press through, to try to figure out how to continue on despite recognizing that this is a serious and an imminent threat to their humanness, to their being. And I think that it's really important in these conversations to, one, acknowledge the sheer acknowledgement that this is a real, a difficult, and a complicated situation that sometimes you can't find the words to express. And I think when it comes to racial trauma, until you have sat in that space, sat in the shoes of the group of the individuals that have experienced it, a lot of times all you can do is express empathy. But I think that acknowledgement that this is something that you might not understand is also very important. So in this conversation, there's so many things that occur with groups of people, with individuals that have experienced this type of trauma. Everything from high anxiety, symptoms including sweats, nightmares, heart palpitations, fear, nervousness. A typical person that is normally very sociable, has a lot of words, very giving, very loving, all of a sudden is withdrawn, begins to pull back. Those are the realities of what anxiety can do and how it can escalate. Feeling guilt and feeling shame. For individuals that might know people directly that are dealing with this, there can be a lot of guilt of how was I able to get out of this situation and they weren't? Why was it not me? Or even shame of, if I only maybe did something different, that this situation wouldn't have occurred. And I think in the situations recently that we have unfortunately been exposed to with the news and with social media, there could be a lot of feelings of hopelessness, feelings of can't catch your breath, can't recognize why is this happening, and feelings of is this ever going to end. I think also hypervigilance is something to acknowledge. That moment that you can be stepping outside or even in your home and you're unsure of what's going to occur next. And I think in many of the situations that have been dealt with recently, and we have been privy to and have seen, it's very challenging to find safety, to find spaces of comfort, to recognize that places that we used to feel comfortable, that we used to call home, that we used to feel that outside of everything else that we have to experience, this is our space where it's our safe haven, is no longer that. it could be very challenging to deal with, to experience, to be able to navigate daily. And so I wanted to put that out there. I wanted to put those feelings out there. I wanted to put is the thought process a lot of times when you are trying to deal with or wrap your head around this type of trauma. And I wanted to put that out there because for many of us, whether we're on the direct end or the indirect end, it is a lot of uncertainty. It's a lot of unable to wrap your head around or even make sense of the dealings and the things that are experienced and the things that you are directly going through. So I'm talking about it in a broad sense. But then I want to also add the layer of not only the exposure to the events, the aftermath, but even you directly experiencing it. You're walking out, you're getting the nonverbals, you're getting the looks of disgust, the looks of uncertainty, the looks of even feeling like that you're less than. Maybe going into a workspace, into an educational space, and feeling like you are constantly being policed. Policed in a sense of you're being called into question your activities, your everyday work. You're being questioned of your appearance. You're being questioned of your hair, your skin tone, your dress, on top of being questioned of your education, your competency, your ability to navigate work, on top of feeling despair of the current state of our country. I wanted to paint this picture for you because for a lot of particularly African Americans, this is the current state that we're in. It's much uncertainty. It's much despair. But as our ancestors and our forefathers and foremothers have done before us, this spirit of resilience, this spirit of strength takes over, where you recognize that things are unfair, you recognize things are unjust, but you have to continue to keep navigating for your household, navigating for your children, navigating for your own sanity, and trying to balance all of those things are extremely challenging. So, this idea of managing racial trauma is a complicated and a difficult one, and one that a lot of times many professionals and many even lay people, general community people have a difficult time trying to navigate, because how do you tell someone who is in the midst of experiencing that how to move forward, how to seek wise counsel, how to process with the proper people? And so I felt that in this experience, in me being in this grouping, in me daily trying to navigate these experiences, I thought that one, it was important to share what a general experience can be. Now, again, all African Americans, all individuals that are in a racial and ethnic minority are not one and the same. And so these experiences are of mine and are of many that are around me, but the experiences can look very different depending on who you are, where you are in the country, your education, your socioeconomic status, your access, your privilege. And so it's important to unpack all of those pieces of how it can impact everybody as they're trying to navigate through the day to day. So, what I want to do right now is talk about how not only the current state, but even historical trauma can impact how you are managing. I think that we being in an age of knowledge, of information, of access, many people are starting to be exposed to how deep trauma can impact them, not only within your family, within your DNA, but also within the generations behind you. Many of the traumas is within us, it's embedded in us. It is we were raised in the trauma. We were raised by someone who experienced trauma from the generations prior. And so being in this age where we're in a country that is very divided, very tense, we're uncertain of day to day what is going through, but we have rights and privileges that our foremothers and forefathers didn't have. It's very difficult to process. I remember at a time where I even had a conversation with myself around, should I feel this despair, this hopelessness? Should I even attempt to compare the experiences of 2019 to the experiences of the 60s and 70s, or even back far beyond when African Americans weren't able to vote, when we weren't able to share the same water fountain, sit in the same public transportation, or even public space as someone that doesn't racially and ethnically look like me? And it's that, again, that guilt and shame, that conflict, that tension of trying to share the experiences of your forefathers and foremothers, but at the same time recognizing that you are exposed in a completely different way with social media and with news. And so I think it's important also, with many people that can be watching this live, that can be in many different generations, that we must understand that what we're going through right now is very much aligned with the trauma of our forefathers and foremothers, but it's very different in the way that we're exposed to it. And so I think it's important for us to also determine that, versus ourselves who have a lot of access, our forefathers and foremothers had other ways of trying to cope with these traumas, with these difficulties of trying to just navigate life, knowing that they can go outside and their life will never be the same. And so I think it's important too to also recognize that managing racial trauma isn't just in the 2019. It has been the 2018, the 1960, the 1900, moving way beyond our comprehension of those that just live in this time. And so one of the things that I wanted to share briefly are ways that, as a mental health professional, we tell clients, we advise clients, we recommend to clients of how to deal with general anxiety, depression, um, difficulties in navigating life. But I want to add a twist, because racial trauma isn't just anxiety, it isn't just depression, it isn't just peer relationship difficulties. It is the experience that you are dealing with on a daily basis that is hard to process and hard to get through from day to day. So one of the things I want to share with you all is just a couple of things that I have personally done to attend to myself, as well as what some in my community and my sacred friendship space have done as well. The first thing I will say is finding your safe space, finding that place that is soothing, that is supportive, that is non-judgmental, is so key and so important. And what can this space look like? It could be anything from finding individuals in your life that even acknowledge that you are going through a time that either they can directly identify with, or they have compassion and empathy regarding. Safe space can include sometimes not even diving into conversations around what's going on. It's a healing space. It's a space that can be quiet. It's a space that can be full of laughter. It could be a space that can feed you and refuel you. And that space can look different for many of us. Some are, their sacred space is a religious space, such as a church, a mosque, a synagogue. Some sacred spaces is in people's homes, in with their family and their loved ones. But I think it's important to identify what that space is and ensure that that space is available to you when you are in need of it most. Monitoring your intake of information is very important too. And I know this is a very challenging one because we all have cell phones. Most of us are constantly in technological spaces. We're on the computer, we're on our laptops, tablets, etc. But controlling how much of it we are exposed to can be very important. Now, when I say controlling your intake does not mean that you are ignoring or discounting or even acting like that these issues are not currently happening, but it's providing that boundary, that protection of your peace of mind, your spirit, to ensure that you are limiting the amount of things that can bring on negative responses, that can bring on high anxiety, that can bring on frustration, sadness, despair. That might mean turning your phone off. That might mean turning off the notifications for your local news, for your Facebook, your social media. That's something that could be very important. It could be very helpful in terms of trying to just protect your space, protect your peace. Limiting the time that you are devoting to unfulfilled relationships. And this one is huge because many of us are in spaces where we can't control who we are around. We can't control who we have to engage with. But I think one thing that's important is that we learn the word no. We learn when we are emotionally unavailable to handle certain situations that might cause a lot more energy in us than we're able to give. If we are around people and we are surrounded by individuals that are not fueling us, that are not encouraging us, inspiring us, spaces of a listening ear, spaces that you feel like that you can be your whole self authentically, it might be time to also take a step back and consider, is this a healthy space for me to be able to process, to be able to find freedom, find breath? When you are dealing with trauma, the best thing that you need is support. And when you feel like that you're not getting that, it is definitely time to reconsider who and where you are adding to, giving your time to, placing yourself in. The last and final one, and I feel like that this is a common theme for Vision of Promise LLC lives, is to take time for your self-care. When you are dealing with trauma of any kind, self-care is critical. It's huge. Self-care could be anything from maybe finding your favorite meal to maybe planning a time just to get away, to do something you enjoy. It could be something as simple as watching maybe something that's comical, doing a puzzle, journaling. Self-care can look like many different things for many different people. And I think it's important because as we're navigating through life and as we are constantly intentionally and unintentionally exposed to traumatic events, to things that are upsetting to us, to things that do not bring us joy, to things that diminishes our spirit, ensuring that we are still attending to our self-care, or we're having an accountability partner that's ensuring that they're asking, hey, what are you doing to care for yourself today? Hey, are you okay? Do you need anything? Is so crucial. And a lot of times we don't have the energy or space to provide self-care for even ourselves. And so I think that it's important that when we are in a space to kind of provide some navigation, to think things through, to ensure that we're putting things in our homes, putting things in our cars, things in our workspaces that provide us joy. I'll give you an example. I love gummy bears. It is one of my favorite things. And I have gummy bears constantly in my workspace. And it's a thing that is a reward. It's a thing that's a treat. It's a thing that it provides that soothing, comforting space sometimes when I'm not able to actually get away physically. And you can find that thing for you, whether it's keeping up with a crossword puzzle, whether it's trying to navigate how to deal with certain issues. I think it's important to maintain that. So, as I conclude this evening, I wanted to again acknowledge that managing racial trauma is not easy. It's not something that you can manage and um, perfect in a day. It's something that unfortunately at times we can't control. But I think one thing that is key is to constantly ensure that you are doing what is necessary to take care of yourselves. So again, thank you all so very much for tuning in. Thank you again for your support of Vision of Promise LLC. Please visit our website, www.thevisionofpromise.com, and also follow us on Facebook and on Instagram. So again, thank you so much for your time, and take care of yourself.